Self-harm among teens is on the rise, with a shocking 1 in 5 girls reporting they've engaged in this type of behavior. Teenage depression among young women is reaching alarming levels. And an even more disturbing trend of cutting and other forms of self-harm are rising as well. Because they are considered a symptom and not a diagnosis, finding treatments can be difficult. Teenage girls are often hesitant to open up because they don't want others thinking they're suicidal. With such an alarming and dangerous trend rising, what can be done to help those who are at risk? We're now joined by parenting expert and author of the book series, The 3 R's of Parenting: Respect, Responsibility, and Resilience, Dr. Deborah Gilboa. We also have board-certified psychiatrist Shivani Chopra joining us today. Thank you both so much for being here, talking about a topic that I think is so important. And Dr. Chopra, I want to ask you first, what do you believe is causing this rise in self-harm?
You know, it's interesting because I'd say at least once a week, I have a parent say to me, it's just not the same for these kids these days. There's so much pressure. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. You know, kids are really overcommitted. Adolescents are really overcommitted. And I think it can be really overwhelming. So, you know, there's the expectation, whether it's internally imposed or externally imposed, to do well at a lot of different things. And, you know, when they're overwhelmed and they can't cope, then I think some of them turn to self-harm as a maladaptive coping mechanism.
So, Dr. Chopra, I have a 12-year-old daughter. So I'm going to put that out there because there's a lot of self-interest and concern, but I'm sure for our viewers too.
Sure.
How does this manifest? Like, we as parents, what should we be looking out for, and how can we address this if we do see it?
You want to look for any sort of scars or marks on the arms. People typically will self-harm on the arms, the legs, and the abdomen. I mean, of course, they can happen anywhere. Burn marks, cut marks, you know, any sort of healed scars, you know, that always is something that's alarming to me. You know, if you have an adolescent that is carrying sharp objects with them, so, you know, a hidden razor in their backpack, or as a parent, if you go into your kid's room and you see that there's, you know, razors or scissors or other sharp objects that are sort of hidden in their bed, under their bed, in their drawers, that's always alarming. You know, if you have a kid or an adolescent that comes home and, you know, they're spending an hour in the bathroom, for example, and that's not typical of them to do that, especially after having a bad day, that's concerning.
So I'm just trying to think this through. They're not doing this because they're enjoying the sensation of hurting themselves. It's really kind of a way to gain control when they feel out of control with all these expectations and in the world.
So the most common thing that I hear from my patients is that they are in so much emotional pain and distress that they want to transfer that to physical pain. So that feels more manageable and feels like they can control that more, as opposed to the uncontrollable emotional pain. You also have adolescents that will self-harm because they feel numb and they feel nothing, and so they want to feel something. And so cutting is better than feeling nothing. Sometimes you have adolescents self-harm because they want attention, you know, or they want their parents to take them seriously. I'm really struggling, Mom and Dad, you guys aren't hearing me, so here, look at this. You can see that I'm really hurting.
So what does a parent do in a situation like this? Because self-harm is scary, because self-harm is one step away from suicide, quite frankly. So what should parents do, and what role do parents play?
There's no such thing as parenting fixes everything, but good, engaged, self-aware parenting helps a great deal. And also, it's the only thing we can control as parents. So if you're worried that this is happening in your child or in their friend group or just in their awareness, talk about it. Ask, hey, when you're feeling like things are out of control, what do you do to gain control? The big problem that we have as parents is, as soon as we worry that our kids are self-harming, we feel angry because we're so scared. And so we attack, or we shame, or we deny. And none of those things help our kids. They're all valid feelings, but they don't help our children. So it doesn't matter how we feel. We have to get to how they feel. The more we can ask about this without judgment in our voice, the more likely they are to be able to even open up to the possibility that this is something they know about or have ever considered or have done.